All right. Here we are, and made my... Oh, because it's got the chat on there. Okay, so I'm trying out some new things here. I have boosted my resolution and bitrate quite a bit. I'm going to try some different settings with my mic, my MV7 here. Right now I have it working through the Motive app, and it's got all the auto stuff on. What does it have on? Let's just see. It has on auto level, natural tone, no reverb. It's got on the real-time denoiser. It's got on the popper stopper. It's got on the high pass filter at 75 hertz. And that's it. So, let's see. Is that what is coming out? Yep, that's the Motive mix. So we got that. The only thing I wanted to add to it, which we can, I'll edit the filters right here. I put a limiter on there. If I take the limiter off, this is with the limiter off. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. There we go. And that's with the limiter on. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. I've also added, I don't know if this will sound better or not, but that's noise suppression. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. This is a noise gate. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. A compressor. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. And the limiter. We already did that one. So that's with nothing on, just the Motive effects. That's with everything on there. Noise suppression, noise gate, compressor, and limiter. And this is with just the limiter on. I think I'm just going to leave the limiter on because I think everything else is being done through the Motive mix thing. So I'm going to keep it like that. As far as the resolution, it's supposed to be a lot better. Supposedly, if you bump your... I've got a gigabit fiber, so it should be... I've got plenty of upload. What's that, 1,000 megabyte upload? For 1440, that's supposed to use, YouTube uses a different codec, which is supposed to look a lot better. So I bumped it up to 1440. My webcam's awful. I would like to eventually use just my iPhone with a continuity camera. But it's a trade-off because gaming with a Mac is never going to be like this. So maybe in the long run, get a mirrorless setup, but right now I'm not too worried about it. So we'll just go with this. See how this sounds. I think it sounds okay. My levels, I'm in the red a little bit, but it should be limiting it mainly. So let me just take a listen and see what it sounds like here, if I can find it. Yeah. See how this sounds. I think it sounds okay. My levels, I'm in the... No, I sound good. So I'm just going to play a round or two beyond all reason. And I'm going to listen to what I was listening to before, Daniel Davis Deep Dive with Alastair Crooke. This is exactly what I would be doing if I wasn't live. So I'm just trying it live, seeing how it goes. So let's switch to live here. There's no game running yet, so let's fix that. First of all, let's get our YouTube video playing. It should be right here. Let's see if we can hear it.
New Year's Eve.
It's not playing through the speakers. So I'm going to fix that. Out through the headphones.
We are on the very threshold just now,
go.
hours away from ending 2025, and it has been a very momentous year for the
Desktop
Russia-Ukraine
audio
war.
at
It saw the
-8
entry into
dB.
office of Donald Trump, who said he was going to end the war in a day in Russia and Ukraine, and then all of the drama that's happened all throughout the the
I can't hear any
winter time, then into
difference
spring,
in
then into the
changes.
summer, and into this current spate here. Everything keeps promising that we're right on the cusp of ending the war. We're 90% of the way there, and then just on the
So I'm gonna go with
near
that.
aftermath
All
of
right.
this big meeting that
So let's
Trump
switch
had
to-
with Mar-a-Lago with
I named this
Zelensky,
Asmongold looks
phone
maxing
calls,
because I feel like I'm kind of in an
bracketing that on either side
Asmongold
with
outfit.
Vladimir
We've
Putin,
got
other
my kid's
European
mess
leaders.
right here.
The
a
question
bag
now
of
is
half-eaten
where are we with this
barbecued
war?
sun
And
chips.
most importantly, where is it going next?
I'm pretty
Apparently,
proud.
Zelensky has
pretty
a good
proud of what I
idea.
got going on
He thinks
here.
that Trump should
I think
fly to Ukraine to help, quote, end the
Inspiration.
war.
I mean, who?
And if you can see that subhead
I
there,
was
that's
listening
what
to a video
y'all
of
need to know.
Asmongold telling children how to
Zelensky says
succeed,
peace talks
and I thought, well, I'm a
include the
38-year-old
possibility
man.
of
I can learn
US
from
troops
this.
in Ukraine. Zelensky has been trying,
So let's try
like
it.
just furiously with both President Biden before and President Trump now to get the U.S. sucked into this war. The Europeans definitely want to see that. They want to cheer us on from behind. They want to see us out front, etc. So the question is, will Trump give in to this? I doubt very seriously he's actually going to go there, but you see where Zelensky wants to go to try to figure out where we really are in all this and kind of dig through some of the hype. We have Alastair Crooke with us today, geopolitical commentator. You can read his work at forum.substack.com.
You know what?
Diplomat.
I'm going to do this for my streams.
To have on the show.
I'm just going to play every map.
Back.
And every time I play a map.
Thank you so much. Very nice to be here, even at the tail end of the year.
Maybe even especially at the tail end of the year to try to kind of put a big bow on something that's
every time I play a map,
pretty.
I'm starting at the very top.
Every
time I play a map, I'm going to star it, so I know I played it.
To bring people the truth, and we love it when you come on because you
off.
don't sugarcoat anything, but you do it with diplomatic.
Let's do this one first.
We're really grateful for that. But let's jump right in on this issue here. What do you make of this claim or not claim, but rather this report that Zelensky wants Trump to fly to Ukraine? Why do you suppose he wants him there when he literally just talked to him at Mar-a-Lago?
Oh, that looks good.
I think, I mean, this is just speculation, but my thought is, you know, that...
How's the audio sound? Can you still hear me over the YouTube, or is the YouTube too loud?
From the attack that took place on the presidential residence in Valdai, with 91 drones said to have been fired at the residence of President Putin. Overnight. Just
do this
really
again, I like to build out here and then storm the base. That's most
then
fun.
on the next day, Trump mentioned in his talk with Netanyahu, and he said, "Well, you know, Putin rang me and said, you know, they've been attacking my residence," and Trump allegedly was very angry about that, and I'm not surprised. You know, we do not know the circumstances, but it is quite possible that actually President Putin was at Valdai. Because that's I happen to know this is one of his favorite houses, and you know it's the end of the year, and it's on the Black Sea. And it would be, you know, quite a nice place to escape from the Kremlin at the weekend. So we don't know. And at the moment, the Ukrainians are sort of desperately saying, "Oh, it never happened. There's no proof of that." Well, of course, there's proof of it because I mean, most states, and particularly the United States, has radar all around the Black Sea. So if there's a swarm of 90-odd drones, I mean, they shut down airports when the drones are flying, even at Valdai. So, I mean, of course, they will have. Of course, they will know what's happened.
Okay.
But this is really important.
Just to point out, just for our audience here, the Russians had a briefing today where they showed the tracks of all. It
does look quite a bit better.
Where it was going through the Bryansk direction, and then they. Let's see if I can get the other one back up there. Then it showed where they were actually knocked down. Well, they actually showed some images of some of the drones that they claimed. Anyway, they said that, you know, here's some of the physical evidence of it. And then this is where this is up in the Novgorod region where the remainder of the 41 were shot down. 91 total. A bunch were shot down in Bryansk. And then the remainder were shot down here. So the Russians are saying, here is our evidence. And of course, as you mentioned, that the Ukraine side is saying, yeah, no, we definitely didn't do that. What do you make of it?
I make of it that it's actually very serious. It could be more serious than people realize. The first thing to say is that remember that Putin spoke with Trump just before the talks, before the lunch with Zelensky and his team. And at that call, he said, would you, I'll call you back in 2 or 3 hours afterwards. Well, if someone had succeeded in geolocating that call between Trump and Putin, they might well know his whereabouts. His whereabouts are very tightly held in Russia, very tightly held. It's very much a secret issue. But I mean, it's possible that by geolocation, they found his place. And then 2 to 3 hours later, after the talks, immediately after the talks, then all these missiles, these drone missiles, were fired at his residence. Now, the point is, it goes further than that. As one person who is very familiar with this has pointed out, actually underneath that residence or thereabout in that, it's quite a large area that belongs to the presidency in Valdai by his house. There is the underground bunker that actually, in a case of a nuclear war, would control the armed forces of Russia from that bunker. So there is a deep bunker, and there are, if you like, there's not only the presidential plane that would be there, but there would be
high on this map.
Other equipment as well in this bunker, communications equipment. And so this is rather in the same vein, because we've had this before.
You know what I'm going to try to do?
Remember the spider's web attack?
I'm going to see if this works.
When missiles were fired from containers, from trucks with...
I'm going to try to put a compressor on the desktop audio to see if... Should I put it on the desktop audio or on the microphone? Probably desktop audio. Let's do filters, edit filters, add filter, add compressor. And we're going to sidechain ducking. Whenever, we're just going to leave it how it is. Whenever I talk through the mic, it should make it get more quiet. So let's see if that works. Filters. Yeah, that should work. All right, let's see what it does. Learning as we go here.
Sliding roof. And these missiles were fired at
okay, will you duck if I talk? It looks like you will.
A strategic bomber.
Let's listen to it and see what it sounds
base. Like. There are 3 or 4 of them, I think. Some of them didn't work. Either the roofs
Peter
didn't
Piper
open or
picked
the
a peck of pickled peppers.
Exploded.
Peter Piper
this was some months back in the summer, but some did, and they hit these aircraft. Now these bombers are out in the open,
works.
because that is required under the START Treaty. They have to be.
It does
out
seem
in the
like
open,
it works.
so America can visibly see, what's happening.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers
for an attack on the United States, and similarly, American aircraft are kept out in the open. So they are vulnerable then to this sort of sneak attack, which is very similar to the one that the Israelis then used on the 12th of June in their sneak attack on Iran. When they decapitated some of the commanders and also some of the scientists that were working on what they said was the nuclear issues. So, I mean, this will be sending, I'm just speculating that it's possible that actually Putin was that. We don't know, and we will probably never know. But it's quite possible.
Let me ask you a question on this. There's dueling narratives, as is so often the case in this war, especially, in that the Ukraine side says this is all lunacy, that this is purely manufactured in the minds of Russia. They just made these charts and graphs that you just showed there. This claim that all these drones went up, they were all shut down, complete nonsense. They're just using that as justification to come back after us, etc. And then on the Russian side, they're saying, no, it definitely happened here. And the Ukraine side was doing exactly what you said there, is while we're trying to talk peace with Vladimir Putin and we got a location where he was, they tried to go after him. But let's unless you got a phone call from Belousov in Russia or from Yermak in Ukraine, I doubt you did. So I know I'm asking you just not speculate, I guess, so much as just what's your assessment, because you have to look at to find out whether it happened or not. What was the motivation of each side? Because I have a hard time understanding why Ukraine would even contemplate something like this. But it's to go after Putin. I mean, if they succeeded, I mean, there's no chance that that's going to cause Russia to capitulate. There's almost a certainty that they would just completely annihilate the Ukraine side. So what was the potential gain by doing this? And let's look at that first. And then we're going to secondly look at what would be the motivation for Russia to pretend like it happened and just make it up. Let's see what on the Ukraine side first.
Okay, well, first of all, let's say, I mean, it's quite possible that Zelensky didn't know that this was happening. There are other elements in Ukraine that take operation.
I do have a pause button. This is cool. It's FN F7. That's nice.
Decisions in coordination with either the CIA or MI6, and because they would need that sort of data, the data input, in order to be able to target, the president's residence at Valdai. So quite clearly, it would require an outside service to facilitate it. We don't even know where the drones came from. It's possible that they came from Estonia, rather, where drones have been flown. Ukrainian drones have been launched before. But if not, then the drones may have come from Ukraine. But certainly, I mean.
I forgot my tea. Hang on. Oh. I'm going to get at least an hour of the Epstein book in today. That's the goal today. The productivity goal on my day off. But we're going to drink tea while we play this and listen to our show.
I mean, the whole area is covered with radar.
Catch up on the news.
You can probably pick it up from Obeid in Qatar. They have the massive radars, X-band radars across all of that area. I mean, I don't know that they did, but I mean, I would think that,
So if you guys don't play this game, once you get your energy up, metal's usually what causes you from not being able to build units fast enough, which you want to get your army big so you can defend yourself. And these little energy converters, highly explosive, so you don't want to set them right next to each other because they'll cause a chain reaction if they blow up. But each one of these will convert a certain amount of energy into metal.
After that call, I'm sure Trump asked his people, did these drones fly? And I'm sure he got an answer saying, yes, they did. But what was the object of this? I think it was to sabotage the possibility of an agreement and that it would put an end to sort of normalization between the United States and Russia, because certain elements in both Europe and in America do not want this war to end. They want it to continue. And there are many reasons for that. Some of it is financial reasons. The Europeans will be really on the hook for a lot of losses because they've guaranteed loans to Ukraine, to Zelensky, with the IMF. In other areas, they've put money. They own a lot of Ukrainian bonds. The banks will be in a bad place if they're not able to crush Russia and to take its resources as collateral to back up their very fragile, if you like, credit.
Do you think that there are still financial voices in Europe that have any fantasies that is still even on the table of possibilities?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely.
To crush Russia and take their resources as collateral. At this point.
They still, absolutely. We have this fantasy that goes on and on that Russia is a house of cards. It's a house of cards. If you remember the Europeans, when the sanctions were first imposed and the assets of Russia were frozen, the Europeans were ecstatic. I mean, talking about the elites, not the ordinary Europeans here. I'm talking about the Brussels elite, the NATO elite. And they were saying, a French minister was saying at the time, you know, oh, the ruble will collapse within a month. Putin will be out of office. It will be all over. And of course, they have fantasies of going back to the 90s when, you know, the West did nearly steal most of Russia's resources during that period when the ruble was destroyed effectively in that shock therapy that was applied by the Harvard boys in Russia in the 90s. I mean, people were destitute, everything. You could buy, you know, Russian resources. US was flying in physical dollars in aircraft to buy up oil and gas and other resources from Russia. So yes, the fantasy goes on. It's a house of cards. You know, we've heard
and I guess I got to say there's something here to validate. Gary, let's go a little out of order. Pull up that full screen there of this Russia tired of war, because there is a piece. Let's see. This is the Washington Post. This was yesterday. Russia's war grinds on. Its society is fraying. And this is a very long, extensive article, and it has a lot of anecdotes about people in Russia that are tired of the war, about things that aren't going well. And then it makes this comment here: Belgorod and residents of Russia's regions bordering Russia form part of what they call a warring Russia, a minority of the country, roughly 20%, consisting of soldiers, their families, patriotic volunteers, and workers in the military factories who consider the war vital for Russia's survival and are pushing for victory. The rest, he says, the other 80%, are either passively loyal, indifferent to the war, opposed to it, but taking refuge in their private lives, or living in exile. With the implication being this, that I think, as you say, if we just keep pushing a little bit more, this house of cards could fall. Is this part of that same effort that you think here at the Washington Post?
Oh, absolutely. This is, I mean, you know, I mean, we have the two, if you like, two wings. We have Tulsi Gabbard saying this isn't the case. You know, that we don't see sign that the Russian economy is collapsing, and we see, you know, that Putin does want and is open to a normalization of relations with America. And then you have the other wing led partly by CIA, it seems, but beyond that to powers that are above that, donors, big donors, who have interests in resources, interests in money aspects of this as well. And you have Europe, which is closely aligned, particularly, you know, the financial world continues. I mean, you know, London is you know, a minnow, a pygmy in political terms now, but it still has, if you like, you know, that whole financial world that rotated around the city of London still exists and still has interests in Ukraine and in Russia and what happens there. And they don't want it, and they don't want it for another reason. And that is because not only that, but also because Russia as a whole, and it has been like this. I mean, you know, we're in the third attempt to crash Russia. One was with a Bolshevik revolution, then in the 90s with the economic, if you like, attack on Russia, the shock therapy. And now we're in this.
It's the first thing I've ever heard that I didn't like of Alastair Crooke was that the Bolshevik Revolution was an attempt to crash Russia. That's some Lenin worked for 30 years. It's the Wall Street plot. I mean, I'm sure there were certain people, and no revolution is completely pure. I'm sure certain people were working on the side of the Bolsheviks and the capitalist states, but to act like that's all it was, that it was nothing for working people, I mean, that's a whole lot of work to just take over Russia, expropriating land and giving it to the peasants. I mean, okay, taking all kinds of natural resources off the world market. I have trouble believing that, but okay. I normally love everything Alastair Crooke has to say, so that's the first thing I've ever heard, that the Bolshevik Revolution was an attempt to destroy Russia. Okay. Not buying it. I think it was an attempt to set the working people of Russia free. That makes sense.
Third one with the Ukraine. And why is this? Because the whole of the vision for Europe was that, you know, in the post-war period, we would have a global world and that we would have a single government that would deal with health and all these other matters, technocratic government. It would be all a one world, that people would be disembedded from nationalism, from patriotism, and would come together in a sort of semi-communist nirvana. And of course, Russia stands complete opposite to that. It is a state that is proud, that is patriotic, that has nationalism, and it has also orthodoxy. And Russians really...
How do you rationalize this with them working directly with China? I guess China's just going to leave them alone. They're just doing it out of survival. I mean, I don't think China's going to force their system on Russia, but just the economic success of comparing one to the other, you know, the materialist conditions make the argument. You don't have to do anything.
You know, do follow this orthodoxy. It means something to them. And it means something to be Russian. And so it stands completely at odds with, if you like, the Davos model, the Davos vision of the future. And so they can't allow that to, and it stands in complete opposition to the rules-based order. It's saying, no, we're going to have a different multilateral order now, not your rules-based order. And so they can't allow it to stand.
Well, and if I could just say that the West is definitely not going to take this lying down, and they're going to continue to struggle against this change of the rules-based order, the one that is definitely beneficial to our side, and we want to keep on doing that. And in his end-of-year speech today in Germany, Chancellor Friedrich Merz said this.
The German government derives its fundamental mandate from this assessment: the renewal of the foundations of our freedom, our security, and our prosperity for the coming years and perhaps decades. The renewal of these foundations will only be possible if we in Europe secure our peace in freedom. But Russia is continuing its war of aggression against Ukraine with undiminished ferocity.
And this is not a distant war,
that does not affect us. For we are seeing ever more clearly, Russia's attack was and is part of a plan directed against the whole of Europe. Every day, Germany is also subjected to sabotage, espionage, and cyber attacks.
So he's making the claim there that German security and freedom itself is on the line here, and they have to have this situation to where the war, their peace, as he called it, is established. And he says that Russia is actually the root of all this evil. And in fact, he says, he goes a little bit further, not just that this war is going on, it's bad for Ukraine, but that it has been from the beginning a plan actually to conquer all of Europe. What do you make of that?
Well, the last part is just nonsense. I mean, it's not worth spending much time demolishing it, because it's...
That's how I feel about the Lenin was working with Wall Street. Okay.
It's very obvious. There's no interest in Russia. I mean, actually, they rather despise Europeans these days. They think they're full of hatred for them. And so the last thing they want is to get a boatload of quarrelsome Europeans landed on their plate. For what? They've got massive land, they've got resources, they have everything they need. They certainly don't want Europeans as well. It's just a nonsense. But what you're seeing there, and this is very important to underline, I mean, we're not talking here about a rational position, a rational ideology. We're talking about Manichaeism, seeing everything in terms of good and evil, dark and light, and that Russia is the dark, is the evil, and that Europe is representative of the light. I mean, rather like, you know, the city on the hill in American thinking. And this is a very dangerous thing. It came in really some years ago and has got embedded in the elite European thinking that sees everything as in these Manichaean terms of good and evil. And so this is why they want to continue the war, because they don't want a settlement, because as some of the leaders, the European leaders, have suggested, you know, it's not enough to have an agreement with Russia. It has to be de-radicalized, in their view. It has to be cleansed. It has to be psychologically removed. It has to go into therapy. It has to go into some sort of process of cleansing it of its sort of militarism in this thinking. I mean,
good luck with that.
These words. They say these things about it, so that only when Russia has been sort of psychologically rehabilitated can it be a part of Europe. I mean, this is just sheer delusion. I mean,
so it's not unlike what happened.
I want to see what the stream sounds like. It's not Roger Waters, it's Alastair Crooke. I should have put that in the title. Does sound like Roger Waters, though.
So it's not unlike what happened.
I think it's loud enough. It's not Roger Waters, it's Alastair.
Sort of process of cleansing it of its sort of militarism.
Yeah, that sounds fine. I'm not gonna mess with it anymore. You know what? I kind of just want to see what it sounds like, though. If I do on the desktop audio, edit filter, add a limiter at the end. And just make it -1. I kind of just want to see. Let's see.
after World War II when Germany and Japan were defeated militarily, and then there was a lot of rehabilitation going on there, which basically de-radicalized.
I quit. I had a boss that wasn't very nice to me and talked down to me, and so after 4 years, I said, take this job and shove it. I worked there 5 minutes on Labor Day, and then I quit.
Radical.
I quit. And just make it -1.
It has to be cleansed. It has to be
said,
in this thinking. I mean,
good luck with that.
Words. They say these things about.
And I just want to hear what this sounds like. Hang on.
Both of those populations, especially the Nazi, with something along those lines?
Precisely along those lines. I mean, they make that analogy, and I've heard it made by Ron Dermer, the Israeli.
I just want to hear what this sounds like. Hang on.
Both of those populations, especially the Nazi, with something along those lines?
Precisely along those lines. I mean, they make that analogy, and I've heard it made.
It does sound much louder. I don't know if I like that or not. We'll see. I may play it like that for a while, just see what I think when I listen back. I'm still tweaking things and getting it how I like it on here.
The Israeli former envoy to the United States, and he was talking about the Palestinians and saying they need to be not just disarmed, but they need to be de-radicalized. And when someone said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, well, Japan. That was a perfect example. Germany, but...
I love this. I love these little resurrection bots. We'll just bring back a whole nother army. And I find that's just one of the easiest ways to win, if you can start doing that. Sometimes they'll heal them all the way up. Sometimes they won't. So I usually have one guy kind of like heal everybody like this. If I get a couple of them, it'd probably go faster, but once my level 2 is built up, we'll just send in some rocket trucks and take them out that way. I'm gonna go ahead and send these guys up here. I'm gonna have these guys heal. I don't know if I want that. I'm gonna play it for a little while, and then I'll listen back and see what I think.
Japan was the example of the de-radicalization. And so, you know, we're seeing really quite profound and dangerous forces operating in Europe. I mean, it's not just the delusion that they have some, you know, illusion in their view. It has to be cleansed. It has to be psychologically removed. It has to go into therapy. It has to go into some sort of process of cleansing it of its sort of militarism in this thinking. I mean, they use these words. They say these things about it, so that only when Russia has been sort of psychologically rehabilitated can it be a part of Europe. I mean, this is just sheer delusion. I mean,
so it's not unlike what happened after World War II when Germany and Japan were defeated militarily, and then there was a lot of rehabilitation going on there, which basically de-radicalized both of those populations, especially the Nazi. With something along those lines?
Precisely along those lines. I mean, they make that analogy, and I've heard it made by Ron Dermer, the Israeli former envoy to the United States, and he was talking about the Palestinians and saying they need to be not just disarmed, but they need to be de-radicalized. And when someone said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, well, Japan. That was a perfect example. Germany, but Japan was the example of the de-radicalization. And so, you know, we're seeing really quite profound and dangerous forces
set up here
operating in Europe. I mean, it's not just the delusion that they have some, illusion. It is Manichaean. It's going to something which is, deeper still, the sort of sense of good and evil and how they are playing a part.
Oh, yes.
To defeat, and that they see themselves as the good, as the sort of vision of the future. And they have that.
If anybody likes this game is free, which is crazy. It's a remake of Total Annihilation, and it is free. It just accepts donations. There's not even any like skins or nothing like that. Okay, I'm gonna check out because we're gonna win here real quick. We're just chugging out now. Let's see what this sounds like. See if I like the I don't think it really matters either way. The other one is a little quieter, but I'm kind of curious if it will still duck. I bet it will. Why would it not? Duck the audio when I talk. But
can I just ask you, can we?
This will be the test right here. Will you duck the audio when I talk? Can you hear me over the desktop audio?
But they can't come out and say it. They can't come out and just say, well, no, we want to keep fighting.
The compressor should still work, even though there's a limiter involved.
So it appears to me, and
we'll
tell me what you think,
when I listen back,
that the West is kind of cloaking this in, you said it, the good versus evil. We're the good. So we're willing to talk, man. We're willing to have these negotiations. But then they put things in their negotiations, these what I call poison pills that will virtually guarantee that Russia would never agree to the terms. For example, that the line of contact will be the border. There will, no Donbass will go back to Russia, no Zaporizhia, Kherson, etc., which the Russians say is non-negotiable. No talk of neutrality status. No talk of rights for the Russian people that would be living in whatever's left of Ukraine. And one of the other key ones, it's very interesting, is Russia has called for demilitarization. Ukraine, on the other side, says that they want increased militarization. Here is an interesting selection from the American newspaper here talking about this issue. Gary, if you can bring that. This is interesting here for various reasons. Ukraine now has Europe's biggest military. What happens when the war ends? On this sin, this is what I think is one of the poison pills. Zelensky has said that Ukraine needs to maintain 800,000 active personnel, rejecting Russian demands that its military be capped at 600,000 as part of peace negotiations. European leaders recently agreed on Zelensky's figure. European leaders agreed and said that they would pay for it. But funding a large military is particularly expensive. Europe spends around 30% of its GDP on defense, even with allies picking up the tab elsewhere. Russia's defense ministry, interestingly enough, is at 7.3% of GDP on the winning side. I point this out because this highlighted area there on the first one, Russian demands that its military be capped at 600,000. Russia never said 600,000. That was Trump's 28-point plan. And then when the allies and Zelensky got hold of it, they jumped it up to 800,000. Russia said it was more like around 85,000 is what they would be looking at. What do you make of this as an example of a poison pill designed to make sure that there's no...
Walmart stopped selling the cheap brand of fluoride alcohol mash mouthwash. Lol. A-holes. Indeed. First world problems, but a real one. One hits you right in the mouth.
No solution.
Clearly, you're right. I mean, because at the Istanbul talks in 22, what was proposed and accepted by the Ukrainians, now I might be wrong on the exact numbers, but it was around about 60,000, 65 or 85, I can't say exactly, but quite different from 850,000. I mean, first of all, that's a huge army. It's bigger than any army in Europe, and would require enormous resources. And frankly, the resources are not there. Europe is bankrupt. It can't produce the resources to fund. It can barely, not sure that it'll be able to produce the resources to keep Ukraine going in the next year. We'll have to wait and see whether that's possible after the attempt to use the frozen assets of Russia to fund it fails. Whether they're going to be able to do this, we have to wait and see. But really, I mean, that document is a sabotage document. I mean, the 20 points. It's, it has, it's carefully designed to say, oh, well, we did make this concession here and this concession, but they know perfectly well. I mean, the whole aim of it was to sort of tip President Trump closer and closer to the European position of demanding a ceasefire and all of these terms, which would really mean asking for Russian capitulation.
That's a serious radar.
On this. And Russia has no intention, and why should it? Because the balance in the battlefield is going very strongly. The current's going strongly in their favor across Donbass. And as Putin said just the other day, and he said, well, I don't think there'll be much point in anyone talking about Ukrainian voluntary withdrawal from Donbass, because they're withdrawing now under force of arms. So I mean, we don't have to sort of rely on that. So this is there's this complete divorce from reality, from the ground. You have events taking place on the ground, and ultimately you can have a complete, if you like, separation of reality for so long, but eventually events determine the outcome to conflicts. In my experience, I've been in conflicts for 30 odd years. Ultimately, the narratives go on and the narratives continue, but in the end, there's a trial of strength, and at the end of the trial of...
You know what? I'm going to take this limiter off because I'm not listening to it at full volume. I'm kind of mixing it in with the game a little bit. So, properties. No, filters. Edit filters. I'm going to take that off. Okay. I'm going to try it like that. See what I think. That's how it was at the beginning, but...
Battle resumed.
The strength, then possibly an outcome, a political solution is possible. But we haven't finished that trial of strength just yet. We're close.
We haven't finished it, but as you point out, it is definitely starting to pick up momentum from the Russian side to the west. And just a few days ago, you mentioned some things that Putin said in that same meeting where he had with some of his generals. You had General Gerasimov talk about some advances in the Zaporizhia area and that they were moving forward, not just in the Donbass, but in the south. And they were completely, and apparently have plans on completely conquering that as well. Today, Gerasimov made another comment that it's not just in the east, but also in the north.
The northern group of forces has completed the liberation of the Kursk region, and in accordance with the instructions of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, is establishing a security zone in the border areas of the Sumy and Kharkiv regions of Ukraine. In total, approximately 950 kilometers of territory have been taken under control, and 32 settlements have been liberated, including 14 in the Kharkiv region and 18 in the Sumy region. The largest of these is the city of Vovchansk. This month, the pace of expansion of the security zone has increased. 7 settlements have been liberated. The President of the Russian Federation has set the task of continuing to expand the security zone next year to ensure peaceful life for residents of the Belgorod and Kursk regions.
So they're saying that, hey, and they're signaling as clear as they can. What you're seeing in the east is going to continue to move westward. But now he's saying what's in the north is going to continue to move southwards as well. Exactly. So they're going to be bringing this vice grip in. And so if we continue to pretend Russia's a house of cards, as you said earlier in this episode, if we continue to believe that we can just, through sheer fantasy, push on for an outcome here and sabotage the peace, Alastair, that seems to me that the only thing it's going to leave is a continued advance of the Russian military until at some point they'll have a military victory. Do you see it differently?
No, not at all. You're absolutely spot on. That's right. As I was saying, you know, it's events finally that determine it. You have, you know, I've been in negotiations before, and sometimes, you know, there's just no, it's impasse, it's paralyzed, it's gridlocked. You can't take the negotiations forward. And the only thing then is to stand back from it and then allow the trial of strength to take place. And the trial of strength will either bring a resolution or it'll bring the capitulation of one side or the other. I mean, that is just reality. And so that's what's unfolding. And I see, you know, also in the south, I mean, they're moving towards Zaporizhia, the city. And it's quite likely that they'll always be able to take it. They had it once, and after all, it's a very pro-Russian city. So you can't tell. These things unfold in their own sort of time, in their own way. But sometimes they cascade, and they go much quicker than you expect. Sometimes it's slow, but like, you know, bankruptcy, you go slow, and suddenly, wham, you're right down on it's over. So I think there's a possibility that these things, I mean, I saw this in Afghanistan with the morale of the Mujahideen, you know, that suddenly it just cascades. And that all of the Mujahideen were no longer in Afghanistan. They were sipping green tea in Peshawar because they weren't going to go back and be the last casualties in a war. So, you know, things can change quite quickly. So I think we'll just have to see. But this is an attempt, and I think you asked me at the beginning. So, you know, the plea to Trump to go to Ukraine, you know, is a desperate attempt to pretend that you know, Zelensky is interested in a ceasefire when everything he's just put his name to in Mar-a-Lago, 20 points, is designed to make it impossible for Russia to accept. It's a sabotage element. It's a poison pill paper. So you can't, so I think all he's trying to do is sort of, and I do think because the Russians will have taken what happened, if it did happen, well, I mean, certainly, I believe it happened, the attack on the residents in Valdai, but the Russians will have taken this very seriously because it touched on their sort of strategic nuclear situation. And this is not you know, this follows just a little earlier, if you remember, when the talks were ongoing, I think it was in Berlin. I can't remember the exact sequencing of dates, but then 4 ATACMS missiles, long-range missiles, were fired into deep Russia. And where were they fired? At Vorezhne. Now, Vorezhne is where Russia has its over-the-horizon radars. Nothing to do with Ukraine. These are not radars, you know, you're a military person, you understand. These are not tactical radars. These are for intercontinental ballistic missiles coming in from the United States. These are the over-horizon strategic radars for Russia. And so just a couple of, whatever it was, last month, there was this attack on Vorezhne. all of them were shot down, like these were shot down. But what is Putin thinking? Putin will be saying to himself, what's going on? I mean, first of all, we had, if you like, spider's web attack on our strategic nuclear fleet, bomber fleet. Then we've had the ATACMS on our strategic radar system for ICBMs. And now we've had attack on our strategic headquarters for managing a war during a nuclear incident. I mean, what is it America is doing and what is it after? And, you know, if you're the commander, even if you think these things may be unconnected, you can't afford to just pretend they didn't happen. You have to take them seriously and you have to come to some conclusion about what is going on in the West mind. Are they thinking about some sort of nuclear engagement? I hope not. I don't think that's likely. But you can't just, you know, brush everything aside and say, well, oh, that was just, you know, accidental. We don't pay attention to it. And I think,
so let me ask you this question: that in terms of what you said just a second ago about things can go along a certain path, and then all of a sudden they could collapse. And you mentioned a couple of examples. I could also add in there the American version of the Afghan war that I first came out in 2012 and warned. Actually, in 2009, I warned that we could lose the war if we didn't make major changes. We didn't. In 2012, I warned that our leaders are all lying to us. The war is not getting better, etc. But it still stumbled right along and kept going for years. And as far as anyone in America knew, it was just the next day, just status quo until we got to July, August of 2021, and then the entire the entire Afghan military collapsed overnight, and the whole thing fell like a house of cards. Actually, did fall in that. Do you see the possibility of anything like that happening with the Ukraine side?
Yes, I do think. Although I think what happened in Afghanistan, sorry, just to divert back to your example, was that there'd been a great deal of work on patching together a coalition within Afghanistan. The tribes there are very diverse. I was there for 4 years during this period. And so I was dealing with all the Mujahideen leaders at this time. And someone who was known as Qasem Soleimani had been working for 10 years, creating the sort of conditions in which that collapse would happen almost overnight. And it was a very careful, because normally Afghans would never cooperate, they would never organize themselves in this way. And
just
it was
letting
remarkable that happened. And yes, and then the military collapsed because the whole structure had moved in a different direction, the strategic structure underlying it. So these things can happen because, you know, while we're focusing on what's happening at Pokrovsk and others, I mean, there's another collapse going on, and that's going on in the parliament, in the Ukrainian parliament, whereby overall Zelensky's lost his overwhelming majority in the Rada, and that some of the Rada are split off and are joining the opposition groups there, calling for a new start and for elections. And there is quite a push going on there. Everything has been upset by this corruption scandals. So there's a lot of, it's very polarized, it's very bitter, much name calling. But I mean, this is another sign of a sort of, if you like, a psychological collapse that is of course related to this, because all of them have their friends and relatives on the front line, on the battlefront. So, you know, like any army, the word gets back. People tell their families, you know, this has been a real mess up. It was a disaster. So they know that it's not true, or what the Ukrainian military forces are saying about what's happening in some of these cities in Kupiansk and so on, saying, oh, well, we've taken it back from Russia. You do a bit of geolocation and see what's really happening, because you'll see the Russians already there. They've actually pulled off quite a good operation there, I think. So,
and let me ask you just before we shift gears here to something different here at the end. Let's just kind of project a little forward. The way things can happen are always going to be impossible to predict, but it's not hard to predict that the fundamentals will play out over time, and at some point the Ukraine military will collapse. What will the Europeans do then when they have made, like I showed with Mertz there a minute ago, and you could certainly have done the same thing with Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, the Kaja Kallas, and of course Ursula von der Leyen. I mean, they have all made their bed in saying that Russia must lose, Ukraine must win, and now that if militarily you can no longer hide it and they literally collapse, how is the West going to play it then?
Well, I think the first thing is they'll have a mental breakdown. I mean, that's what's going to happen first.
What's going to make them have a mental breakdown? Kiev, boots in Kiev, Russian boots in Kiev. Let's see. What was that at? Go back a little bit.
And relatives on the front line, on the battlefront.
Putting compressor on just to try again,
like any
so
army,
get a feel
the
for
word
how
gets
it
back.
sounds.
People tell their families,
Limiter,
this has been a real mess up. It was a disaster. So they know that it's not true, or what the Ukrainian military forces are saying about what's happening in some of these cities in Kupiansk and so on, saying, oh, well, we've taken it back from Russia. You do a bit of geolocation and see what's really happening, because you'll see the Russians are already there. They've actually pulled off quite a good operation there, I think. So,
and let me ask you just before we shift gears here to something different at the end. Let's just kind of project a little forward. The way things can happen are always going to be impossible to predict, but it's not hard to predict that the fundamentals will play out over time, and at some point the Ukraine military will collapse. What will the Europeans do then when they have made, like I showed with Mertz there a minute ago, and you could certainly have done the same thing with Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, the Kaja Kallas, and of course Ursula von der Leyen. I mean, they have all made their bed in saying that Russia must lose, Ukraine must win, and now that if militarily you can no longer hide it and they literally collapse, how is the West going to play it then?
Well, I think the first thing is they'll have a mental breakdown. I mean, that's what's going to happen first.
I didn't pay attention again.
Well,
I do this a lot. Do you guys do this? You listen to something and then space out.
Way things can happen are
this has been a real true, or what in so on, saying do a bit already. So
let me ask you just before we shift gears here to something different here at the end. Let's just kind of project a little forward. The way things can happen are always going to be impossible to predict, but it's not hard to predict that the fundamentals will play out over time, and at some point the Ukraine military will collapse. What will the Europeans do then when they have made, like I showed with Mertz there a minute ago, and you could certainly have done the same thing with Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, the Kaja Kallas, and of course Ursula von der Leyen. I mean, they have all made their bed in saying that Russia must lose, Ukraine must win, and now that if militarily you can no longer hide it and they literally collapse, how is the West going to play it then?
Well, I think the first thing is they'll have a mental breakdown. I mean, that's what's going to happen first.
Did it again.
Well, we've got to go through this.
Okay. Last time, I promise.
Yes, happen. But I think
they literally must. And of course, Starmer showed with collapse.
It's pretty much
fundamental are always going to
Ukraine collapse.
Let's just kind of project a little forward. The way things can happen are always going to be impossible to predict, but it's not hard to predict that the fundamentals will play out over time, and at some point the Ukraine military will collapse. What will the Europeans do then when they have made, like I showed with Mertz there a minute ago, and you could certainly have done the same thing with Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, the Kaja Kallas, and of course Ursula von der Leyen. I mean, they have all made their bed in saying that Russia must lose, Ukraine must win, and now that if militarily you can no longer hide it and they literally collapse, how is the West going to play it then?
Well, I think the first thing is they'll have a mental breakdown. I mean, that's what's going to happen
Start,
first.
I guess.
Well, we've got to go through this, yes, because, what I think we are in Europe, but I think America is in its own way in the same thing. We're going through a process of catharsis. The old order is breaking down. It's already half broken down, but we have to go through a process of catharsis, which could be very unpleasant and could be very traumatic. But before, if you like, the new is born, is able to be born, we have to clear out, if you like, the debris of the old world, the old order, and the old system is clearly dying. But the new shoots have yet to take root. They will, but we've got to go through this process of catharsis, I believe, before we're going to be able to get back to, talking about European values now is just pointless, because what are European values? No one knows. They'll point to Athens or Greece or something like this and say, oh, well, this is what our values are. Well, this is nonsense. We don't have those values. If you go back and talk about people who set those values,
we got Tech 3, so we're just messing with them now.
Most people will say, oh, what, is that something on TikTok? I have no idea who they are.
Right, yeah.
So we have this. So we do have this real problem, and there will be big changes in Europe politically. Britain is a powder keg. France is on the edge. It's of some sort of financial crisis. Germany is just sinking industrially so fast. It's manufacturing base, particularly the small base, but it's just declining, so rapidly. We are coming to, one of these inflection points, and we have to go through it, and we have to come out and reinvent ourselves at the other end. It's going to be painful and not very pleasant. And at the moment, people just go on partying. Everyone is like, cabaret, the last dance. So let's enjoy life while it's still here, and we'll put off the reckoning that is going to come in due course. I know that's a rather dark picture, but it is perhaps also one, sometimes, as I said to you before, you have to look truth in the eye and see, the economic circumstances and what Europe is going through. So it will lead to. The problem for Europe is that the European elites have destroyed all the political bridges out of this situation to a new future. They've insisted that, they only center parties, coalition centers can be allowed to exist in Europe, cutting out both left and right. And they're usually coalition parties that never produce any answers to any of the problems of ordinary people. And so they are discredited.
Yeah, and that is certainly that's gonna have its day in court, so to speak, its day at the polls, and it's gonna be a mess to try to explain that. In the amount of time we have left, I want to shift gears to another topic here, because the world is bigger than just what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, as important as that is. And I want to look to the Middle East, because that obviously has ramifications for a great portion of the world as well. And there was just a big meeting in Mar-a-Lago, not just with Trump and Zelensky, but with Trump and Netanyahu, who also flew in to meet with Trump. And of course, at the time they make their speeches, they get in front of the cameras, there's glad handing, slapping on the back, shaking hands, etc. But maybe behind the scenes, things aren't all that clear, because some evidence looks like that Netanyahu wants to come to convince Trump to allow him to completely, quote, finish the job in Gaza, which ironically and perversely, Lindsey Graham is all for. He's a big supporter of that.
See, we got
also, it looks like
20 minutes left in this episode.
Trump to go back and again, quote, finish the job.
I'm going to try to play a small map real quick.
What do you make of what happened with Netanyahu here, and where do you think that's going?
Well, I think very, very, it's a very complex problem, but reduced to its essentials. Perhaps a more cynical and we follow what's going on in the Israeli press quite closely. The more cynical amongst the Israelis say the main purpose of going to Mar-a-Lago and seeing Trump was to get Trump to ramp up the pressure on the Israeli president to give Netanyahu a pardon, or to cancel the trials altogether, because things are becoming very, very difficult for Netanyahu. The legal opinion shows that he's quite likely to be convicted on these various corruption charges he's facing. But then there's Gatargate. This is a scandal whereby it's been shown that Qatar was paying 3 members of his close prime ministerial team, and they were paying money.
We're going to attempt to take over the metal on this map, and then we can just build up and crush them. Pretty much comes down to who gets the metal first.
Money for this, that is more or less established, but the question is, what were they paying for? And is this, and you know, harsh words are being used about it in Israel, and saying that this has to be investigated and he has to pay the consequences of this. So it's really bitter and really divided. And so one of the reasons I think for going there was that Netanyahu wants something a balloon to lift him out of the ma of these sort of unfinished wars in Gaza and Lebanon and in Syria, and to sort of energize, because he has elections coming up in 26, and he wants something that is popular and would gain public support. And of course, a war with Iran would do that. There's a popular support in Israel for that, not necessarily with all the security cadre, but there is popular support. And of course, he knows there's popular support in the US Congress on both sides of the House for a war with Iran. So he did raise it, and Trump committed the United States to supporting a war on Iran. He said, if it's about ballistic missiles, yes. If it's about nuclear, immediately we will support it. So this is what, you know, was good for Netanyahu. He wanted these languages. He wanted he's come back with a different way of presenting it to the United States. In the past, he's been known for sort of saying, you know, Iran is only weeks away from a nuclear weapon. All that's finished. He now says it's not about that. It's about the fact that Iran is constructing this very sophisticated ballistic umbrella. It's not just reinforcing the old.
They've already constructed
it's completely new ideas, new strategy about use of ballistic missiles. And if we don't destroy it quickly, then there won't be even a chance later. If Iran moved towards a nuclear weapon, there won't be a chance.
Sorry, let me ask you on that point there. That would almost, and I'd like your interpretation then of what we heard from I believe the Iranian president here in just the last several days, who came out and said that he considers himself at a full-scale war with Israel or the West in many quarters, and he seems to be pretty confident. So that would seem, on the one hand, to literally justify what the Israelis are talking about and their warnings, and might make it more likely that Trump would agree to something like that. But I can't imagine somebody would take action that would precipitate an attack against them, unless, and this is what I like your
girls are having fun,
unless he's talking from a real confidence, because his offensive and defensive systems now with missiles is better than it was during this so-called 12-day war, which is what they claim. How do you see that?
Look, Pezeshkian is a leader of the reformists. He's been actually doing his best not to see any sort of conflict taking place. So I think he was slightly taken out of context in how it was expressed, in that he was just saying, unfortunately, it seems the whole world is against us, which is, in a nutshell, what
1 hour, 15
which
minutes.
Is slightly different from the way it's been presented. But the other thing is, I mean, look, all the familiar signs of a coming war are very apparent. First of all, you're getting articles in the Western press, in the British press, saying, you know, it's 9/11, there are secret cells of Al-Qaeda about to explode, it's going to be mayhem on our streets. Iran is coordinating it, even though any idiot would know that Iran and Al-Qaeda are complete enemies of each other, but that's what's being published in the British press. Then what else do you have? You saw the Iranian rial collapsing. There's a move against the currency. And then there's talk of demonstrations on the streets. All the signs of, you know, the preamble to a war taking place. Someone is preparing it on the assumption that it's going to happen. So we can all read the signs on the ground. And so when Trump sort of embraces Netanyahu, you know, you don't read too much into that, because he's often said things like that will knock Iran into hell. I mean, this is sort of Trump language, but I mean, what you see is the preparation, and why it's important is because, as I just tried to describe, Netanyahu needs a war to finish off his projects. He needs a big war to do that.
There's a certain quarter in the West that seems to be looking at this whole region and taking an eye over to Damascus and going, you know what, the way we got rid of the previous dictator, and now then they have al-Shara in there, and he seems to be really friendly with Trump, going to the Oval Office, putting cologne on and all this kind of stuff. Maybe if we can do the same thing in Iran and get rid of that regime and bring another really friendly one into power there. What do you say about people who are making that analogy?
Well, of course, they're transfixed by what happened. But if you look at what really has happened in Syria and the situation it's in now, with massacres taking place freely across the, you know, I've been saying to people for now 20 years, the West usually thinks it can use these Salafist jihadis for their own purposes, and because they see them as rather simple sort of people who don't really understand politics, only for the West to find that they have been used by these Salafist forces themselves. And of course, you know, you have an Islam, you have not, you have an ISIS, I mean, person now in Damascus. And what is likely is that the state is going to fall into complete disarray and be at war with it. The Kurds, the Alawites, the Sunni, the Shia, all of them will be fighting in this. It was only contained largely because it was a sort of secular state at one point. Now all of those boundaries are broken, and you have all of these elements.
And apparently there's some issue with Turkey up in the north as well that may also have some eyes on some things in there. Is that accurate?
It's very accurate. Turkey is, you know, was a key player in bringing about the downfall of Assad. He was one of those that was working in it. He was, you know, he implanted the jihadists into Idlib as a deliberate weakening policy. And so he was there, and of course, I mean, he is partly the father of the collapse of the Syrian state. So this is on his shoulders, and now people in Turkey are saying to Erdogan, you know, was this such a good idea? Really? I mean, are we going to now have to get in and take responsibility for this? Because Israel is taking more and more land and keeps coming in and attacking on an almost daily basis into Syria. Certain forces supporting particularly the Druze in the south. The Druze are mixed. Half of them were pro-Assad and half of them were pro-Israel. And he's supporting one side of the Druze. Israel is supporting one side of the Druze against the other side of the Druze and against the Kurds. And the Kurds
what a mess.
Are supporting. It's a complete mess. Actually, it's the sort of example of Syria is the reason why the Iranians are they were never inclined to it, but they certainly are not inclined to go down, you know, a Western-sponsored regime change.
I missed that part. I want to go back and hear that. What's going on with the Kurds?
In Damascus, and U-20
into the same thing in Iran. The way we got rid of the previous dictator, and now then they have al-Shara in there, and he seems to be really friendly with Trump, going to the Oval Office, putting cologne on, and all this kind of stuff. Maybe if we can do the same thing in Iran and get rid of that regime and bring another really friendly one into power there. What do you say about people who are making that analogy?
Well, of course, they're transfixed by what happened. But if you look at what really has happened in Syria and the situation it's in now, with massacres taking place freely across the, you know, I've been saying to people for now 20 years, the West usually thinks it can use these Salafist jihadis for their own purposes. And because they see them as rather simple sort of people who don't really understand politics, only for the West to find that they have been used by these Salafist forces themselves. And of course, you know, you have an Islam, you have not, you have an ISIS, I mean, person now in Damascus. And what is likely is that the state is going to fall into complete disarray and be at war with it. The Kurds, the Alawites, the Sunni, the Shia, all of them will be fighting in this. It was only contained largely because it was a sort of secular state at one point. Now all of those boundaries are broken, and you have all of these elements.
And apparently there's some issue with Turkey up in the north as well. That may also have some eyes on some things in there. Is that accurate?
It's very accurate. Turkey is, you know, was a key player in bringing about the downfall of Assad. He was one of those that was working in it. He was, you know, he implanted the jihadists into Idlib as a deliberate weakening policy. And so he was there, and of course, I mean, he is partly the father of the collapse of the Syrian state. So this is on his shoulders, and now people in Turkey are saying to Erdogan, you know, was this such a good idea? Really? I mean, are we going to now have to get in and take responsibility for this? Because Israel is taking more and more land and keeps coming in and attacking on an almost daily basis into Syria. Certain forces supporting particularly the Druze in the south. The Druze are mixed. Half of them were pro-Assad and half of them were pro-Israel. And he's supporting one side of the Druze. Israel is supporting one side of the Druze against the other side of the Druze and against the Kurds. And the Kurds
what a mess.
Are supporting. It's a complete mess. Actually, it's a sort of example of Syria is the reason why the Iranians they were never inclined to it, but they certainly are not inclined to go down, you know, a Western-sponsored regime change in Iran. But it was the same language, what they said on the 12th to Trump. Iran is a house of cards, same thing. One push, the house of cards will collapse. We can walk in like Syria, and, you know, the shop will be untended. We can just go in and take whatever we choose from Iran. It's oil, it's gas, it's huge reserves. And then, you know, we'll own the whole of the Middle East. Won't that be epic? To quote, that was Witkoff's words to Tucker Carlson's. It would be epic. So, I mean, that's what's going on. And it plays out in different ways. In the United States, it's not just about Iran. It's playing out because of the divisions within the MAGA group, because of some, you know, there's been a strong reaction from these America Firsters saying, well, you know, why are we operating Israel first? Excuse me. And,
look up this metal first.
This is a wedge that is being drawn in as different sectors try and take control of, if you like, the MAGA, especially against ahead of the midterms. And so Trump, I think, is trying to show that it's possible to be, if you like, supportive of Israel, but to criticize Israel. And of course, others who are trying to weaken that structure are saying, no, it's not possible. If you criticize Israel, you're criticizing the Jews. This is anti-Semitism, and we accuse you of anti-Semitism. And so it's become very bitter in MAGA. So part of what's going on about Iran is a sort of proxy for the war in MAGA and how to manage MAGA to make sure, you know, about the midterms, to prepare for the midterms. And MAGA, of course, will have a huge influence in who might be the next president after Trump, either because Trump leaves early or because of the next elections in 28. So, you know, it has repercussions. And the same in Israel. There is a deep divide. There is a war between what I call the state of Israel and the kingdom of Judea, the settler, the right wing, the rabbis, and they are fighting. And so Iran has become brought in and is involved because it's going to determine in a similar way what is going to be the future of Israel. Just as, you know, the question, the Israeli question is going, you know, America's foreign policy is becoming a central issue for the young. Both the Democratic side and the Republican side, but principally in MAGA, a hot issue, as we saw with TP USA meeting recently.
And
so
let me ask you a question. Just like we've looked time periodically at, and in fact, at a press conference or an interview on Fox News a couple of days ago, Zelensky was point blank asked, "Can you win this war without the United States?" I'll ask a similar question. Can Israel, if they can't ever get Trump to agree to join in with a new war by choice, can they launch it on their own, and can they succeed militarily?
Absolutely not at all. But what they might be doing is like, if you like, follow the Ukrainian example of trying to create the circumstances to try, and I've said before, you know, what the Europeans were trying to do essentially was use either an incident in the Black Sea, the strike on the tankers, or an aircraft flying up that very narrow passage up the Baltic Sea as the basis for creating an incident that would then pull in America into a war with Russia. And so, I mean, Netanyahu will be looking at how to create some sort of outrage incident that takes place. They could then leave President Trump with no alternative feeling. There's no alternative but to go fully behind Israel into this war.
Well, I certainly hope that doesn't happen. Although there's never no choice. Even in a bad situation, he would have some choice. Yeah. The question is he strong enough to push into that? And that is very much unknown because it could literally go either way. But in either case, I mean, you tell me if you disagree. I mean, maybe that's kind of what you're saying here. I think it would be anywhere from horrible to catastrophic to even attempt a regime change war in Iran, which could go so much worse than the Iraqi version, where we got rid of Saddam Hussein, or Libya, where we got rid of Gaddafi, or even what may later happen after we got rid of the guy that preceded Shiraz in Syria, etc. I don't see much chance of this working out well for anybody, even Israel, if they get what they want. How do you see it?
Precisely. I mean, Iran has been preparing for this ever since June. Of course, it's preparing, and it was prepared. It hasn't even used most of its bigger missiles, its ballistic missiles and its hypersonic missiles. During the 12-day war, they stopped pretty well after a few days, but they're all intact, and they're dispersed around the whole country. And I was asked at one point to go and explain this to your defense secretary. I didn't see him personally, but his head of staff. And I explained that, that these are all, the Iranian missiles are in deep silos, dispersed around this huge country. And they have a dead hand system that each one is divided into about 57 different sort of cantons, provinces, if you like, each one which is autonomous and can continue to complete the war, even if they lose Tehran and
I'm sorry, for those who may not know, can you explain what the dead hand in this scenario is?
It just means that it doesn't require a commander, central command, to give an order to fire the missiles. The missiles are, if you like, autonomously controlled by the local commanders in each of these different provinces, with an instruction to continue, even if Tehran is destroyed, to continue the war against Israel. So the war would continue even if the high command and all of this was destroyed. It is constructed so that if Iran doesn't survive it, nor would Israel.
Fascinating. I was actually not aware that was news to me, and I'm glad to have aware of that. Well, listen, we're just going to keep an eye on that as well. And so, man, as we head into 2026, a lot of potential flashpoints on the horizon. We didn't even talk about the potential for Venezuela, but you got to add that in there, or the China-Taiwan issue, which is also starting to flare.
Very serious. So, very serious.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back on.
As you know, I was in China just a little while ago, and they're very serious about this. They take it very seriously. It would be a mistake to underrate it.
I'd love to have you back on specifically to talk about that, because it doesn't appear that that's going anywhere anytime soon. So hopefully early in 26, we'd love to have you back on to talk about that very issue. But in any case, we're really grateful for your openness and your honesty and your deep in information that you've had that people just don't get anywhere else, because a lot of the things you say are not popular, or people don't want to hear the difficult truths. And we're very, very grateful that you tell the truth, whatever it is. Thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And you can see there that's the former diplomat's Substack there, conflictsforum.substack.com. You don't have to wait for him to come back on here. You can find out all the things he's saying just like this on there. Look forward to seeing you next time, and we will appreciate you guys and see you on the next episode of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Larry Johnson is coming back today. Sorry, I don't want to miss that. Obviously, one of our big fan faves here at 12 o'clock today. So just a little under an hour from now, Larry Johnson will be back. Thanks, folks. We'll see you soon on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.
Okay. Now you can hear my mic. So I've been talking to myself the whole time because you got to add the mic on each one, on each scene. Browser, but that's not. I kind of had that up before. That's pretty much what browser was. I will figure it out. It's close enough. If I go back to browser and just add, because I'm gonna, let's switch from this droid cam to this cam. It should show up, but it's not. I'm just gonna add it as a new one. Transform, fit to screen. So now either one of those will work. MV7. Does it have all the filters on it? Yes, it does. It's got the limiter. Okay. I think we're okay. Learning as we go here. All right, guys. Well, thanks for hanging out while I try some new things. Asmongold, I'm coming for you. But I got a ways to go. Thanks for hanging out. See y'all later.